Hello, everyone, and welcome to the talk by our presenter, Anton Angelov. Anton is CTO and co-founder of Automate the Planet and inventor of Bellatrix test automation framework. He's also the author of Design Patterns for High-Quality Automated Tests, High-Quality Test Attributes, and Best Practices. His presentation titled Taking Quality to the Next Level, Metrics for Improvement. So during the talk, if there's any questions, please put them in the Q&A and we'll address them at the end of the presentation. So without further ado, I'll hand over to Anton and please enjoy the session.
Hi guys, thank you for having me. So let's begin. In the talk, I will share with you some quality metrics my company used in some of the projects we worked on. And they help us to improve the quality and deliver over time. Also keep in mind that the implementation and collection will be different depending on the tools and the processes that you use. And this won't be an exhaustive list of metrics. And yeah, the context is important and it will depend based on the project from area to area. But I hope that you can find something that can be valuable to you or get inspired to try. So here's our short agenda. First, I will explain what TMMI is, its levels, and when it's appropriate to use quality metrics and why do you need them. Then I will shortly tell you what was our project and how the metrics help us to and how we use them. And I will tell you, of course, what was the process we defined. And the next part will be dedicated to the data we put into the books and how we can use it to calculate the metrics. And of course, we'll be talking about the different metrics. I will try to give the reason what it can show us, right? And lastly, I will give a few tips how to use the quality metrics the right way. So first, what is TMMI? TMMI stands for Test Process Improvement Model. It helps in evaluation and improvement of testing process. And the intent behind it was to develop guidelines in the reference framework for improving the testing process. The goal of the talk is not to talk much about it. Instead, I'm mentioning it because the model defines 5 levels of maturity of the QA organization. Level 1 means you basically don't have any official rules or don't have any QA process. Level 2, you do test plans, you have test plan, you do testing cycles, you're testing, right? Also, you have a test environment. Level 3 is where you are doing test training, non-functional testing, some kind of reviews. Level 4 is where you do more of a, let's say, preventative QA activities, right? Preventative testing. And the level 5 is the proper place to gather data, calculate metrics, and later using them to improve the overall process. Keep in mind that you cannot skip some of the steps or the levels, meaning that trying to use the metrics too early will most probably won't help you. And there are other activities that will improve the quality much more. In one of our projects, the team was developing and testing a highly complex application for supply chain planning, and meaning it was used for manufacturing companies for primarily to help them plan and how many to produce. And we haven't introduced quality metrics right at the beginning. On the contrary, we had to work on all of these levels. That took us, I think, almost 2 years. And then just after that, we created this metric system. So here's the diagram of our workflow. I will not go into a detail to explain each status or transition. We use Jira. because you know every team or company has its own process and flow. However, I will emphasize a few important points and try to explain our process. When a new bug is logged, it goes into a queue waiting for the next day to be triaged. And of course, if it's not something critical from production, then you have to fix it immediately, right? During this triage meeting, a developer, QA, and a product owner participate and assign the bugs for analysis. It is not called fixing immediately because we still don't know whether the observation is a bug or it's not a bug. The developer analyze it and fill some data, root cause, etc., and probably provide some kind of a estimation how it will cost to be fixed. On the next day, having in mind the velocity of the team, the planning, and the urgency of the fix, we plan how to proceed, whether we should fix it in this sprint or plan for the next. And during the testing and analysis phases, most of the data that I'm going to discuss a little bit later, we feel basically based on this data, we calculate the quality metrics. And the most important part is that each month we got together as a team and check the metrics to see what are the trends and try to analyze them and see how we can improve the process if needed. So let's quickly review what we normally put in a bug report and talk about what common metrics we can have using this data. We have a description, the title, the actual results, the expected result, steps to reproduce, environmental info, the priority, how urgent it is to be fixed, the impact, the severity, who is assigned, and the reporter. We all know these basics, right? Now, the data can be visualized monthly or quarterly. Here on the slide, you see a picture from a custom application that I developed back in the days. It was hosted in Azure. We used third-party vendor for this dashboarding. It's not something that I created, but actually I created how the metrics are gathered from Jira with Jira API, and then how we calculate every such metric and then connecting it to the particular dashboard. As we will discuss later, there are many different ways how you can implement this in Excel sheets, with Jira plugins, with Azure Power BI, with custom applications. There are many, many ways. However, here we can visualize the data monthly or quarterly. And even if you see spikes in these metrics, it doesn't always mean that there is a disaster, right? It may mean a newly developed released feature was released the last 2 weeks, or a completely new part of the software. And this is why, because it's just the first time you test it, this is why you have so many bugs. However, when you see a spike, it should be analyzed and can be seen as a warning. Now, other useful common quality metrics are, for example, duplication rate. If there are spikes, it may mean that you need to improve the way you describe the bugs and what titles you put. Maybe you need a better board or a search. Rejection rate. High rates may mean a couple of things. Inexperienced testers, missing requirements, bugs are not well described to be reproduced. Actually, in this particular project that I mentioned, the problem was that the requirements were not well described. Then you have the failure testing rate. Fix is not an actual fix. The developer haven't tested locally the fix. This is the usual reason. Then you have the defect reopen rate. Usually high numbers may mean that the current development triggers a lot of regression problems. It may mean that you don't have enough unit or integration tests. Also, this dependency between fixed and open trend it should decrease over time, or at least staying at the same rate. Otherwise, there may be a planning problem. And the next two are similar: average time to fix or analyze. If the numbers are high here, especially for critical bugs, you may lose business because of it. And you can have a detailed overview for, as I showed you, about the different severity and priorities. And remaining bug strength, it's similar to fixed against opened, but here you want to decrease over time or staying the same. Otherwise, if most of the bugs are deferred, this may mean that the quality is not improving. That the quality improves just after the fixing of the bugs, right? Otherwise, we use logging of the bugs and the quality we use it only for ensuring and making informed decisions. Now, all the fields below can help us to categorize the bugs, providing meaningful statistics and metrics, which can be later used to improve the overall quality and development process. Now, the root cause analysis. After the initial analysis, the developer who leads the fixing should describe here what he found, what is the actual reason for the observed behavior. Actually, we don't use this particular field to calculate any metrics, but I found it useful for, when you analyze all of the bugs sometimes it's useful just to have it as a history, right? As a reminder of what happened. Then you have the root cause reason. This is a category for grouping the bugs by root cause reason, like missing requirements, not clear requirements, miss during code review. This is leading to a lot of bugs. Not enough knowledge about specific technology or something else. You can put whatever you want here. Later, the grouping by this field can help us to spot problems in certain areas of our workflow. For example, code review, requirement phase, or testing. As I said, we used back in the days this particular grouping here for spotting the problem with the requirements. Then you have the root cause type. This is a category for grouping by more technical things, like problem into the database, in the UI components, something like the dashboarding or some other JavaScript component, for example. It may be API integration, like single sign-on or whatever authentication strategy you use, and so on. And grouping by this field later can help you to see if there are any problems related to a specific technical area where we can refactor or do more training. In applications, in projects where I worked in the past, there were many problems that came from stuff into the database, because much of the logic was placed in big store procedures that actually weren't covered with any type of tests, right? So you can use it to spot this type of relationship. Now, after that, you have the bug appearance phase. This describes in which phase of the process the bug appeared. Requirements, code review, dev testing, integration testing, system testing, etc. And later we use the field to see which phase help us most and maybe rethink whether we should invest in some practice or not. For example, if for 2 years there are no bugs from your UI tests, probably you should reconsider whether they are efficient or not. Then you have the bug origin. Maybe it's somehow similar and you can merge it with the previous one, but I prefer to have it as a separate metric. The bug origin contains information whether the bug was caught during our internal QA process or client reported it. Also, maybe you can add here a third option for probably you caught the bug during the acceptance testing phase. This is also an option. And we use it to calculate an important metric measuring the ratio between production and internally caught bugs. And usually the industry standard is that this metric should be below 5%. Right. For more of the bugs should come from production. And then you can always specify in which area of the product the bug appeared, whether it's ticket submissioning system, order creation, invoice generation, etc. You can spot where you have most bugs, right? And of course, the rejection reason, we already talked about it. Now, other helpful metrics that I saw in other projects, you can have rollbacks per month. And actually, I haven't used it personally myself, but for a company that we have a contract with, they use it a lot because they have many moving parts with microservices and similar. And also they have the same metric, but for each separate application for each month. And they use it as a goal between the queues, monitoring whether it's increased or decreased. Also, you can have another metric, rate of delivery of the stories. But it really depends on who is responsible for writing the stories and monitoring it. And actually, I really like the next three. Let me show them to you. Because many companies that want from my company to establish for them test automation practices and architecture, every time the management wants numbers. Usually they heard that the people use code coverage, and they want from us to use it to measure the progress with it. To be honest, sometimes it may work. From my experience, usually there are a lot of issues like timeouts and stuff. We're still fighting to make it right in one of our biggest projects. It's somehow working, but again, we have many problems. And there are also many cases where it's almost impossible to do it, especially in cases where I already mentioned where much of the logic is put into the database and store procedures, right? Or even if it's a desktop application or mobile app, it gets extremely hard. It's a little bit easier for, there are some solutions for web apps because you can connect it to the server, right? This is why I prefer these three metrics: planned test cases for automation against the automated. And you can use it as a Q goal. Also here, the last two, probably you're asking what are these user actions. Actually, we sit together, QA manager or experienced QA with tech lead or probably a product owner, and we define all of these functionalities and actions which you can do in each functional area in your app. And again, we can set the goal for the queue to cover these 3,000 actions in this particular function area. After that, we strive to cover them with automated tests. You need to keep in mind that usually this is a manual work. I don't see how this can be automated. Probably you can, in the past, we use some database scripts to get some information about the different screens and probably applications, but again, it depends on the context and the application itself. So yeah, it's hard to automate. However, I believe it can be quite useful if it's maintained over time. Now, a few considerations and tips. In order to have metrics, you need data and plus the usage of all the fields and to follow the process and changing the statuses. As I showed you, there are a lot of statuses, at least in the process which we defined. And keep in mind that when you start, if you haven't set all of the fields to be required, many of the fields will be empty. And so you should have this in mind when you are building the metrics generation scripts. I had this problem in the past when I was releasing the first version of this app. Because especially if you don't do it at the beginning and you have bugs for 2 years without this information, then it will be extremely hard to calculate proper metrics. You should ignore probably the bugs that don't have this data. If the fields are not required, many people will just ignore them and skip them. Again, it happened to me. And maybe it's a good idea to add help tips and links to the docs where you describe what needs to be put there. Actually, in Jira, this is possible. And I noticed that it's hard for people to orient at the beginning, especially developers. This was part of my job to do some kind of a similar presentation to them to explain all the fields. Then I created documentation. Then we actually did a couple of sessions of pair logging of bugs. So it's important to convince them why this is good for them, why this is not a waste of time, because we can all agree. I agree. These are a lot of fields, and maybe this depends on the people you work with. Not all of the teams will be capable of following so much strict fields and filling so much information, right? So yeah, the part of my job was during the coffee breaks and when we had chit chat with the folks to explain to them how this can be a game changer and how can help us a lot, right? Also, I want to emphasize that these metrics shouldn't be used to punish people and to create tension between devs and QAs. We should monitor constantly whether the process is followed. And the most important part, of course, is to get once a month to get together and make a retrospective and analyze the data. Otherwise, this is complete waste of time, and it will worsen the whole process if you don't use it. As I said, there are different implementations how to do it. I'm not going to share any technical details because from company to company, it's totally different. But you can create custom Jira templates to create these custom transitions, etc. There are some plugins and additional applications for calculating similar metrics as part of the Atlassian ecosystem with Jira. However, at the time of when this project was happening, I really didn't like what I saw from these applications, but many people told me after that new tools appeared, so maybe it's a good thing to research whether there isn't already something that it's useful and to use it to generate this for you. You can use a custom application like myself. Later on, as I shared, another QA architect that we worked together in another project actually created a similar. He used basically the same metrics, but he implemented them through Azure Functions and Azure Power BI in Azure, and it was great. So yeah, it really depends on how you plan to do it. The last time that I presented this in a private with some developers, there were a few questions that I'm going to answer now. One of them was whether there is a dedicated team or person for analyzing the data. I believe that if in your team you have a QA lead, QA manager, QA architect, or maybe the most senior QA, he should lead the effort. However, I believe that this should be at least in agile environment, or if you work together, developers and QA in one team, probably you should do it together in a group of 5, 6, or 7 people. Who participate? Another question was who is participating in defining the user actions and function areas. For me, maybe manual QAs, QA manager, maybe you can work together with your dev team if you are new. Of course, this is always a matter of context. Also, I believe, again, that all of this process with the metrics should be automated, not, Actually, I saw it where there were teams that I consulted where all of this gathering of data was a manual process. This should this can work also, but for me it's a little bit waste of time every month to do it right. Um, and a little bit of a side question was who is the decision maker deciding which is a bug rejected, analyzed, or triaged in our process? And again, I will answer a little bit vague. It depends. I believe it's a team effort every time I emphasize this. However, probably the QA manager or the architect should, or the product owner should have the final word, right? Um, yeah, so these were my tips. If you have any questions, I'll be happy to answer. Um,
Okay, Anton. So, shall we move into the Q&A session now?
yeah, sure.
Okay, great. So, the first question from Christian is: will the slides and recording be shared afterwards? So, I'm going to message someone within TestCon to get that question. But can people reach out to you if they wanted a copy of the slides? Where would they be able to contact you?
You can find me on LinkedIn always. I'll be happy to share them. Also, I believe I uploaded them here in the system. So, but I don't know how this actually works. So,
Okay, I'll find out and I'll share that a bit later on. The next question is how to sell new metric to your group, especially if there are several groups, but we should have statistics for all defects. Statistics for all defects.
maybe we should start with some basic stuff. This is why I mentioned only the important ones. Later on, probably, usually I use always this approach, no matter whether it's with metrics or new tooling, etc. If it's possible, I'm going to create a pivot project, right? Like a small group of, for example, I am going to try to measure this new metric for one team, and then to see whether this metric is helping this team, and then we can use this success like a success story to present it to the whole group. This is my usual approach for not only for metrics, but for example, if you want to add a new feature to the framework, or if you want to establish a new tool, etc. But it really depends on your seniority level, whether you're a decision maker or not.
Okay, great. The next question from Powell: how often update metrics and how often review them with the team?
Yeah, as I mentioned, I believe this should be automatic process, meaning at least in the tool that I developed in the past, and with this solution with the Azure Functions and Power BI, they're real-time updating of all of the metrics, right? If for some reason this is semi-automatic way or halfway manual, then probably you should do it once a month, or this is the optimal way. Otherwise, I believe it will be a lot of waste of time, right? Because at least what I saw before was in this huge enterprise where they didn't have this automatic way. They had two screens documentation how to gather the data from different tools with different SQL queries and so on. So it's taking a lot of time to gather them. So I believe this should happen not quite often. But the analysis and reviewing them, I believe we should wait a bit to gather some more. I believe that maybe the optimal time to gather it's 1 month again.
Okay, great. The next one is from Thomas. Not sure how you keep track with that many metrics. Which one matters and which one not so much?
Yeah, I agree. As I told you, probably it depends on the organization, right? It depends on the people whether it's easy or not to put so many information. For me, if it's just if it takes only 10 seconds to fill some drop downs, probably it's not big of a deal, right? If we don't put so much information like free text, and if everything is calculated automatically, and if you don't need to do anything manually, then maybe it's fine to have many metrics. For me, as much information as you have, you are going to do a much more informed decision. However, if we believe that, again, we have too many metrics, probably I will do the same approach with the proof of concept and for one team. Again, at first, have all of the metrics for 3 months, for example, and see which are the most meaningful for me or not. And then I will just cut the rest for the, when I see which one of them are the best. But again, this is context dependent. I mean, because you can put the things that I mentioned here, most of the information, the drop downs in these categories is just like an example. You can put whatever is important for your particular context of application, right?
Okay, great. To answer Christian's question for the slides and the recordings, so the recordings will be shared on the TestCon YouTube channel after the conference, so people can go there to watch the recordings. If anyone is interested in getting the slides, they can reach out to TestCon via email, and they will return the slides back to you via email, or reach out to the presenter who you wanted to get the copy of the slides from. So the next question is from Sergey. It's who usually would be responsible to fill all those metrics?
Yeah, as I said, most of the time, especially the, let me show you on the slides, especially the bug taxonomy fields, basically most of the time are filled by the developers who is responsible for doing the analyzation. But some of the fields may be filled during the triage meeting as well. However, the fields here at the beginning, the primary issue bug fields, most of the time, these are filled by the QA. So the whole team is responsible for half of them. The QA is responsible when reporting the bug, and then during the analyzation part, the developer is responsible for, or the tech lead. It depends who is watching the bug, right?
Okay, great. The next one from Christian. Any recommendations on how to get the needed data, frameworks, tools, or procedures?
Yeah, again, it depends which bug tracking software you use. In two of the enterprise projects that I worked on, most of the projects actually use Jira. Jira has a really great web API, and I use it in the past. No matter the language, you can get all of the needed data, the statuses and everything. Actually, I created like a wrapper in C#, like an SDK. For some languages, I believe that they have special library for that. Afterwards, it's up to you how you are going to visualize it. I mean, it can be Azure Power BI, any type of other reporting tool. It depends how you are going to save them. You can even, when you get the API, you can easily, with a little bit of code, to create Excel sheet or CSV, and then automatically generate the calculations based on Excel formulas. Maybe this is the simplest way. But again, there are some paid tools like plugins that they're doing this. But again, they don't have all of, they don't work well with custom workflows and statuses and all of that. Usually you should use their own particular template. And in many enterprise organizations, this is just, it's not working, because many of these organizations have their own much more complex process, right? This is the reality.
Okay. Next question from Andreas. What top 3 in practice?
Maybe the easiest, maybe the top 3 metrics are severity. Yeah, I like the severity one in the grouping. This is the first to watch. Maybe remaining bug trends, it's also a really important one. And also the fixed against opened. Actually, it's the same thing. Yeah, maybe filter testing as well. Filter testing means that probably there is some problem in the QA process. So in the development process. So maybe you should watch for this trade.
Okay. The next one says, thank you a lot. What is your input data for calculating metrics? Is it Jira based and the data is taken from tickets/issues, or maybe there is something else?
Yeah, it was Jira based. It was Jira based, and as I said, it's quite easy to get the big bug fields and the bug information with the API. It's a little bit trickier when you have custom fields because they just have some random IDs and you should map them. Again, it's a little bit trickier to get all of the history transitions of the statuses. It's a little bit trickier how to program this, but again, all of this is happening through their API. If you use other tools, like you can use similar metrics for not only for bugs, but also maybe for support tickets. This is possible as well. I think you can expand the system in other cases as well.
Okay. The next one. Did you use a trial period for the new metric you entered to see how relevant it is for the project?
Yeah. As I said, we always use this 3 months period for just one team to see whether this is working or not. And if there is a success story, then we implement it in other teams. But usually this is the period. You need at least 3 months, 3 times to try the process to see whether it's meaningful or not. Again, if there isn't enough data for this particular metric, then we can rethink again whether this was the most appropriate team to implement to test the metric, or we should try it in another team. Yeah.
Okay. The next one. Were the metrics that you had to discard inappropriate or not representative?
Maybe not sure to. Maybe I'm not going to use the word inappropriate, but maybe weren't so helpful, and probably we didn't have enough proper data to calculate them. And in most cases, when we rejected a particular metric, was that probably there was some kind of a technical issue in getting the proper data. As I mentioned, we had a problem with some people not following the process, not filling the fields, or there was a technical challenge how to get the data from the statuses, for example, in Jira. This is my experience usually when something haven't worked.
Okay. Could or should team leads do metrics like this? For example, to present this data during quarterly review meetings?
Maybe if we are talking about dev team leads, probably this is the question. Maybe they can use it. I saw this, again, I haven't used it, but I saw that some QA manager in big enterprise is doing that. I mean, they have, in this big enterprise, they have quarterly meeting for all of the people in the company, and then they have a separate presentation of their QA director presenting some sort of metrics like this and discussing the how this is affecting the process. I believe this should be a job for probably the QA architect than the team lead. You know, at least this is my opinion. But it depends on the organization. Not all organizations have QA directors and architects and whatever.
Yeah, sure. Okay, the next one from Naringa. You said there is a waste of measure, but not using this data. The question is, how do you use this data properly?
Yeah, as I said, we should have these regular review meetings and you know have these discussions for each particular metric, what happened or not, and why it's happening. If you have this, basically these metrics are something like conversation starters during your normal review meetings of your team. This is it. I mean, just when you talk, you use some data, not just general opinion about something that happened. So you can use it. You can use it just in normal agile retrospective meetings, just to bring up and talk with more data about a particular problem. Uh, and if you use it, I believe this won't hurt, right? But again, if you are not, because I saw this in the past, if you don't look at them and nobody cares, then probably you shouldn't do it at all. That's my opinion.
Okay. Next question from Naringa. How not to overdo while measuring? How much parameters should be measured at the beginning?
Probably you should start small, probably with just with the normal, as I said, without these complex back taxonomy metrics, right? These are like advanced metrics. Probably you can start just with the basic ones like duplication rate, rejection rate, filter testing, right? These are just general stuff, or just even if you have just the metric about the functional area, I really like this one. Even if you have just these five, they will be enough, right, at the beginning. And then you can over time add more and more. Just keep in mind that, as I told you, it's a little bit hard later on when you don't have the data to. Probably you'll have to ignore some of the bugs into the calculations. This is the problem there.
Okay. Second last question. How to discuss about metrics that people won't get defensive about them?
Yeah, this is really hard. Um, Again, it should be stated multiple times using soft skills, right, and political conversations that we use this only for to working like a team and again like conversation starters, not about pointing with fingers to different people how they felt, or even if you have to talk with someone, don't do it in front of the others. This is like a big rule for me, right? If you are going to discuss it with 10 people on the table, just talk in general what you can do. And if you have a feedback, then just go to this individual and try to be nice and give feedback. This is like my management approach.
Okay. And the last question, did you measure production bugs rate versus all found bugs?
Actually, we had a month-to-month ratio. I didn't use this particular one. I think if I understand the question correctly, for me, yeah, actually you can have month-to-month ratio between these bugs. Probably it won't hurt to have like you know like a trend for all of the times. It should be easily done. I don't see why not. I haven't used it. Again, I usually have this month-to-month number and just see whether it's improving or not. But again, it will depend whether a completely new functionality was released or not. Yeah.
Perfect. And we've finished just on time, so we might leave it there and end the session. Thank you very much, Anton. I hope everyone enjoyed it.
Thank you.
Thank you.
See you guys. Stay healthy and bye. See you soon.